Hello and welcome back to LDF-Designs. In today's video I am going to be working in these new sketch pads that I got. I received some new inks at Christmas time, so I was using them on this first page just to kind of see what they look like, how they dried. I pulled out a little bit of chalk paint, some matte medium. I got a pack of papers that were gifted to me that are fun to rip up and use in collage work. And then sometimes a little tip, I go to the thrift stores and pick up old children's books, and I will use some of the words or partial photos out of those books and put those into the collage work. I also have some acrylic paints and a little bit of Sumi ink on my workstation as well. So in times past, I've never really had sketchbooks. I think when I first started out, my materials and all of the different paints and things that I had, which wasn't very much, was very precious to me, and I was very frugal about not wanting to waste any of my product. But I have finally reached a point here where I am not having to be maybe quite as mindful with what I'm doing with my materials. And after watching some other artists online and seeing how they are utilizing sketchbooks, I decided to go ahead and pick up a couple, and was very lucky because they were on sale at Hobby Lobby. So I grabbed a few and decided to come home and just play around with some of my materials. I have to say, I found this to be a very freeing exercise, because I wasn't trying to create something that needed to be a masterpiece. I wasn't trying to create something that needed to sell. I just was creating for the sake of creating, and I think it's very easy sometimes to get caught up in all of the other stuff, and then we forget why it was that we started creating in the first place. So I started by just using some of the Sumi ink and making some random marks and lines on the paper, and then picked a couple of the paper collage materials. I had some tissue paper and I just wanted to try putting a little bit of paint onto the tissue paper and then gluing that onto the substrate as well, so did that too. And now I'm just filling in some of the areas with some random colors and intuitively creating this collage piece. If you've ever been in that moment where you feel like your product is very precious and you don't want to waste any of it, leave me a comment down below, because I think in the beginning, when I first started my art journey, I felt that very strongly and was afraid to practice because I just hated the material was so expensive, and still is, but I just hated to waste it, and I felt like in some ways scrapbooks, I was wasting the material because I was just putting it into the scrapbook. I kind of lost the meaning of them. So very grateful to be introduced to this style, and looking forward to seeing all of the different things that I may do in my scrapbooks in the future. I had so much fun doing this. I ended up creating 3 or 4 pieces. So in this video you'll see 2 of those come to fruition. I did end up doing some things to these once I shut the camera off, and you can see some pictures, some final pictures of these over on my Instagram page. Something to note about stencils too, again, probably I'm not the only one that's ever had this happen, but I went ahead and used my stencil and then realized I wanted to go back and maybe trace around it, but really struggled to figure out how I had put the stencil on there. So yeah, let me know that you guys are human too and make those kinds of same mistakes. I don't work with acrylics very often. I don't feel very at ease with them. And so I am trying to teach myself a little more about painting with acrylics while I'm using these sketchbooks. But I had seen a couple of other artists, I apologize I don't have their names, but just in watching random videos online, using yellow at the end of their painting, a yellow wash of some sort, to really kind of bring the piece together and add some more dimension to it. And so I was practicing that with these pieces. You'll see towards the end of each one I go in with like a yellow wash, and I find that it really does enhance the colors. It's kind of a neat technique. So on this piece I wanted to use some fabric. I had in my mind I wanted to practice using some fabric layering and to see how that was going to go. So I did pull several fabrics out, but in the end you'll see here that I ended up going with a little bit of cheesecloth and a piece of, I think it's just basically an off-white piece of cotton material, and then I have some with some yellow flowers on it. I wanted to see what would happen if I added some of the color to the cheesecloth before I glued it down there. And then I kind of liked the effect, but again, I've never done that before, so I was just playing around to see how it would look. And then in a couple minutes here, I got really crazy. I used some of this red staining ink in a piece not too long ago, and I just loved it. And as I put it on here, to be honest, it kind of looked like somebody just bled all over the piece. It was not the right color, it didn't go well, and I had to stop for a moment and try to figure out what I was going to do to bring it back. But I've said it multiple times in my videos before. I heard a wise person say once that, you know, just keep going. If it's not how you want it to look, to just keep going. I do know it's possible to overwork pieces, but I have found that when I stay true to that mantra, usually I end up with something I'm pretty pleased with. So that's what I did. I couldn't remove all of that red ink back off of there, so I just worked a little bit at trying to maybe cover it up and push it to the background a little bit. I did find it handy to use my heat gun every so often to dry the layer that I was working on. With such a small area and so many different things that I was doing, it was easy to get it a little too wet or too damp. I kept thinking maybe I wanted to add some text to this piece, but I just couldn't quite sort out how to do that. Nothing seemed to be quite right, so I went back to the stencils, and pulled a couple of the different stencils I have out and started to try to work with those. Again, because of the rings on the binder on the tablet, I did have a little bit of trouble with my stencil placement. Couldn't get it to lay flat, so it wasn't taking exactly how I wanted. And then whenever I tried to replace it back on top, again, it just wasn't working. So as you'll see, I just continue to kind of fiddle with this area where I sprayed that red ink all over it and just kept trying to make it not be quite so red. So I'm going to go ahead and add some finishing touches to this piece, adding a little more stencil work, a little more line work with my graphite and charcoal pencils, and then I will go ahead and add a yellow wash over the top, which I just, again, really like how that is enhancing the colors. It's definitely something I learned out of these collages that I did. I did make more than one or more than two, and I'll have pictures of those over on my Instagram page if you want to see them there. But in the meantime, I will be wrapping this video up shortly. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do, and feel free to send me some pictures of any of the things that you're doing in your sketchbooks as well. If you haven't given me a like or subscribe, I would appreciate if you would do that. And again, thank you for watching today.